Join me in giving a warm welcome to Joe Newton.
It's kind of difficult for me to speak in a gymnasium. I like to be up close and look at my people right in the eye, and it's kind of difficult when you got people on both sides, but I'll try to do the best that I can. I could hardly wait to come to Hoffman Estates tonight for several reasons. Number one, your varsity track coach is a guy named Peter Rife, and in 1968, Peter Rife was the captain of my cross-country team at York of Elmhurst, and we won the state title, which at that particular time was the third time we'd done it. So he's been very close to me and my family ever since. And then as I sat here tonight, Cheryl Stefani, who is the director of your cheerleaders and teaches home ec at your high school, walked up, and her father, Steve Stefani, hired me at York High School way back in 1954. That's a long time ago. If it wasn't for her daddy, I might be digging ditches. And she walked up to say hi to me tonight. And then, of course, whether you know it or not, this guy, Ron Helberg, was probably the greatest track coach ever in the history of our state. In the middle 60s, his teams at Evanston High School won 3 consecutive state track championships, and that's very, very difficult. We've been very close friends all those years. So it's been a very emotional night for me coming here tonight. Also, Coach Gary Baxter and the girls winning that state cross-country title. I'm a cross-country coach, and I know what it means to win one, Gary, and I think it's a great night for you to be here, and I'm proud you came to hear me. And then let me tell you about this guy, Michael Stryker, right here. I met him 3 years ago. I went to Fargo, North Dakota. Now, I'm a Chicago guy. I hardly ever got off my block when I grew up, a little guy in Chicago. If you got off your block, you got beat up, so you stayed in your own block. I didn't even know where Hoffman Estates, Elmhurst, Wheaton was. I go to Fargo, North Dakota to speak to a track clinic 3 years ago, and this guy is up talking on drugs before 400 coaches. And as I walked in the door, he was right at the part of his story where he was sitting in a car outside a bank on Michigan Avenue. And a lot of people like you and I were walking down the street, and he figured he was safe because they were setting this guy up to make a buy, and they were going to take him off the street. And they had all these agents that were going to protect Michael. But the only problem was they were too far away, and all of a sudden the guy in the back seat put a big .45 right up to his head, and another guy stuck a knife right in his throat. Now, it doesn't sound like very much when I'm speaking here, but when I first heard that, boy, he got my attention. And I thought, how come he's still here talking? Well, he had enough presence of mind to somewhere or other kick the door open, flip the gun out of the guy's hand, knock the knife out of his neck, and dive on the street. And by that time, the agents came to save him. But this man, you know, is a patriot. He's a guy that has done things for young people, that has done things for our country, and sometimes we lose sight of those things. Well, from that time on, Michael then asked me to come and go across America, and I've been all over the country with Mike talking to young people and their parents about drugs. And I really, you know, I'm just a coach. He's the drug specialist, but I come in to try to tell you a few things from my life and then to try to motivate you a little bit. I gave this motivational speech to 1,300 people at Schaumburg High School in September, and son of a gun, Gary, they beat us in the state meet in cross country. I wish I hadn't gone there now. And I'm going to try to tell you the same things that I told those athletes and their parents that night. Now, 10 years ago, if you asked me if anybody at York of Elmhurst was into drugs or alcohol, I was very naive. You see, I all my life, and I'm going to tell you why in a moment, I didn't smoke or I didn't drink. So I just assumed that that's how all young people were. Very naive. And then I kind of started listening a little bit, and now I've really started to listen since I've talked to Mike, and I can sit in the locker room. I heard a guy right in one of my third period gym class today. Guy said to him, hey, you got busted for that big beer party you had over the weekend. I mean, the guys are walking by sitting in the back of the locker room every day talking about where the next kegger is. And I used to just sit there, never say anything. Now I hear that and I jump up immediately and start preaching, man. I jumped on this guy today in my class. We had a guy 2 weeks ago. I had him in class last year, Raymond Thayer, 19 years old. He was a bum then. He was driving down one of the business streets right in Elmhurst about 2 weeks ago. 5 o'clock in the morning, stone drunk, going 110 miles an hour, and he had a 20-year-old guy right next to him in the front seat. Guess who got killed? Not the guy Ray Thayer that was driving that was drunk, but the guy that was in the right-hand front. Hit a tree, not too far, Cheryl, from where your dad used to live. Hit a tree and turned the car over and killed this kid who I had in class 2 years ago. So, you know, it's happening all over. It's happening everywhere. When I was a little kid growing up on the south side of Chicago, when I was like 7 or 8 years old, my father used to vanish for 3 or 4 days at a time. I didn't know where he went. See, I was pretty young. What happened is, in Chicago in those days, you had a tavern on every corner in every neighborhood. And he'd go to the tavern, and he wouldn't come back for 3 or 4 days. He'd get drunk, and he'd lay on the floor, and they'd let him sleep in there. The next day, the tavern would open. He'd be right back in the chair drinking. He'd fall asleep, lay down. And my grandma and my grandpa would have to come, his mother and father, would have to come after 3 or 4 days and go to that tavern and bring him home. I can remember as I got a little older, about 9 or 10 years old, he used to come home at 3 or 4 in the morning and beat my mother to get more money to go back to the tavern. So when I hear young people say that I drink because my folks drink, I can't accept that. Because I determined at 10 years old, young people, that I didn't want to be like my father. Now, that's a pretty tough thing to say, isn't it? I didn't want to be like my father. I didn't want to take that chance. You see, I asked him one day, when did you start, Dad? He said I was a freshman in high school. He went to my high school. He went to Parker High School in Chicago, and then came along and I went to Parker High School later. He said, I was just a smart punk, and all the other guys were smoking and drinking, so I started. And then he became an alcoholic. Okay? Now, I went to high school when I was 13 years old, and when I entered Parker High School as a freshman, my father said to my mother, God love him, cold turkey, I will never take another drink the rest of my life. Now, he was 35 years old at that time, and he lived another 33 years. He died at 68. He never stopped smoking. See, he died of lung cancer, but he stopped drinking. And I was proud of my father, that he was able to do that without any psychiatrists, without any doctors, just all of a sudden. I can remember when I was 11 years old, go to Sox Park, and my father would go to the bathroom every inning. I thought he had bad kidneys. What he had is he had a whiskey bottle in his pocket, and he used to go to the bathroom, and by the end of the game, he would be so drunk, we didn't have a car, I would have to virtually carry him, and I was only 10 or 11 years old, to the streetcar to get home. And then somebody bumped me and he'd want to fight, because when he got drunk, he was very belligerent. Very, very embarrassing for a young guy of 10 or 11 years old. So I have never touched alcohol because I didn't want to be like my father, and I didn't know if I did touch it, if I would fall into that same thing that he did. 15 years an alcoholic, or even more than that. Unbelievable. So, young people, I'm speaking from the heart when I talk to you a little bit tonight, and I'm going to talk a lot about some stories, some athletics, but I certainly hope that you're not going to get involved in this. I heard a statistic that really stunned me at one of these things with Mike, and he brings a lot of other people in. Anytime you sit down to talk to an average group like this, and I assume this is an average group, 85% of the people that are sitting here facing me tonight touch alcohol at least once a year. And 30% touch it at least 4 or 5 times a year. And 15% are what they call abuse drinkers, where you're drunk at least 4 or 5 times a year. That's an amazing statistic. And 10% of any average group that you go to in America are chemically dependent, which means they're alcoholics. Wow, they're like that Ray Thayer. They're on the road to destruction. So as a coach, as a guy from the DEA, as a principal, as an AD, wow, let me put it to you really cold. 10% of all average groups are alcoholics. Think about that. We got a football team of 100 students. That means 10 of those guys are on the road to destruction. And we've got to find them, man, and we got to help them. And that's why I'm involved now with Michael, because I'm a coach. I'm not a drug specialist. I'm out talking to young people, trying to get them to stop. Let me set you up to a situation that happens every week in Elmhurst, somewhere in our town. You're at a party, and you're in a little circle of guys or gals, and all of a sudden, here comes the guy with the marijuana. And they take the first hit, and they pass it to the next person. And you're standing right there, and you know that baby's coming right down that line. What are you going to do? I tell young people you can do one of 4 things, and every one of them will work if you got courage. First thing you can do is when it gets to you, you can say no. And if they don't accept that, then you say no thanks. And if they don't accept that, you say no way. And if they don't accept that, you say, hey, that's not my thing. You do your thing. That's not my thing. But the problem is young people don't have sometimes the courage to say that. You see, when you were born, all you young guys and gals, your mom and dad gave you a name that's pure and just clean as the day is long. And it'll remain that way as long as you keep it that way. I also like to say to my guys, because I only coach boys at York of Elmhurst, hey, you know what? You could be a hero for some little bitty guy over there in the 4th or 5th grade. You realize that by going out and getting drunk every weekend and going to all these keggers, and we're kicking guys off. We lost just a week ago one of our star basketball players was drinking and stupid enough to bring the pictures to school. They fell out of his book. The principal picked them up, and now he's gone. Last year we lost our premier basketball player, same thing. We're always just, it's going on night and day. It's always happening, and it's a difficult thing to stop. But we're trying very, very hard, and I hope that now that Mr. Hellberg has spoken to you and given you some of the things, that you will listen, because little kids do look up to you. I know that all those girls on your team, Gary, now got to be heroes to a lot of little kids around this town. And when you do something that's not right, then you're no longer a hero. And this is a very, sports, alcohol, and drugs is a very vogue topic now. I mean, every time you open a newspaper, there's something in the paper. Lenny Bias or this guy Rogers from the NFL. I could go on and on and on. I mean, it's there. And more athletes are servicing now. And the problem is they're all heroes. They're all guys that we look up to, young people. I had my heroes when I was a young kid that I wanted to be like. Only we didn't have television in those days, and we didn't have all these probings, and we didn't know that all those guys had clay feet, just like most of them do now. So you remember, young boys and girls, that you could be a hero for some other little kid that'll use you as his guide to get to the top. And when you're on the top, brother, you got to act like you're on the top, and you have to accept your responsibilities. Now, let me just say this. The problem is not out there, you know, in the other community. The problem is right here in this room tonight. It's right in the gymnasium at York High School where I teach. It's there every single day. Every single day. And we got to do something about it. So I'm just hoping that you're hearing me, because psychologists say this. This is a stunning fact. Whenever a guy like myself gets up to talk to an audience like this for more than 5 minutes, even if I'm your preacher and I'm trying to save your soul, you know how much you're going to hear tonight of all the things that go on here? 25%, because you can't concentrate when a guy talks more than 5 minutes. That's all. And within 24 hours after you leave this building, you're going to forget 66% of the 25 you got originally, and 30 days from now, you're going to forget 90% of all the things that go on here tonight. So if I can just leave you with one point that's going to help you in your life, so that you won't be like my father was, so that you can be a hero to some little boy or girl, so that you will have the courage to say no when you're at the party. I got a big son. Ron knows this. Michael just met him down in Indiana last weekend. He's a graduate assistant in track and field at Indiana. He was an All-American high jumper. He's a 6'7" guy, weighs about 215. When he was in high school playing basketball and running for me at York High School, he used to say, Thomas, I can't be with you all the time, brother, but when you go to a party and something happens that you know isn't right, you hit the door. Well, I don't know if he always hit the door, but all I know is he made it through his high school career without getting any problems. And now he's made it through his college career basically without any problems. So at least he had enough sense, if he didn't say no, he had enough sense to leave the area so that he wouldn't be involved in that kind of stuff. And I think it's very important for you to know that. There are some people that have courage to say no. There are some people that stand up for what's right. I hear young people all the time say, well, I want to be, you know, I don't want anybody to tell me anything. I want to be different. I want to do my thing. But yet when a bunch of kids say, let's do this, and you know it's wrong, you'll do it. I was driving up here tonight, and I love the Bears. I've been going to Bears since 1952, and they were interviewing Ditka. Michael was with me. You know what Ditka said? A stunning thing. They were asking about what makes a great player. He said, character. He said, if you got talent, you might be okay. If you don't have talent, you might be okay. But he said, if you have character, you can make it in any aspect of life. Now, he's just an old football coach, okay? Character. What is character? You know what I say to my athletes at York? Character is what you are when your mama and your daddy and your coach and your teacher are not there. When you're on your own, now your true character comes out. Anybody can mind when somebody's got a club over your head. But it's very difficult when you're out with your friends and some guy says, take the hit, or let's go down and get the kegger, or let's get the six-pack, or let's drive over somebody's lawn, or whatever they're doing. Very difficult to have character when you're really out of character by saying no. But you know what? We need young people that have character, because you'll make it. Now, I'm off the drugs because that's really not my area, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about motivation and some of the things in my life. We have a great track meet at York of Elmhurst every June called the Keebler International. The Keebler Cookie Company spends $250,000 to fly in the finest high school track boys in the country. It's like an Olympic Games for high school seniors, and I think this year now they're going to add the girls and make it the biggest meet in history. It's the only meet in the world where all the athletes come in with their expenses paid. Even our Olympic trials, where I'm going to be in Indianapolis next July, we only fly in 15 or 20 of our elite guys. Edwin Moses, Carl Lewis. The average guy has to pay his own way. Here we have a meet at York of Elmhurst where we fly them in from all over the world. And it's like an Olympic Games. Well, 5 years ago, we had a banquet. We always have a banquet. It used to be at the O'Hare Marriott. We brought in a 74-year-old white guy to talk that night. I'll never forget it. And I only mentioned that because that night in the room, we don't care what color the athletes are. If they're the best in the world, we invite them. And in that room, we had 300 coaches, athletes, mamas, and daddies, and about 75% of them that year were black. And I thought to myself, how is this 74-year-old, 5'4" old dauber, white guy going to relate to all these great black athletes and their moms and dads and their coaches? Well, our master of ceremonies that night was a guy named Rick Wohlhuter. Went to St. Charles High School, ran for Notre Dame, and in 1976 in Montreal, he got the bronze medal in the 800 meters for America. He was a pretty darn good runner from our local area. So we brought him in to be the master of ceremonies. Rick is a real quiet, inward guy. You can't even hear him when he talks. And he got up to introduce the speaker that night, and I was sitting right over there next to the speaker, and they were still eating their dessert and making noise and laughing and clinking silverware and glasses. And Rick said, "Ladies and gentlemen, could I have your attention, please?" And nobody listened. And I'm sitting, oh, God, Rick, speak up. Finally, he got a brilliant idea. He said, "Ladies and gentlemen, the next person I'm going to introduce to you tonight is worth $500 million. Immediately, the room became quiet, and everybody looked at me. I don't know why. I leaped up, and I said, no, it's not me. I haven't made it yet." And everybody laughed, and this old guy kind of scowled at me right there, and then he came to the dais, and here's what he looked like. So help me God. He went, "Young people," you couldn't even see the guy. He was so small. He parted his hair right down the middle like Wyatt Earp in 1880, and he had a handlebar mustache. I've never seen a guy like this, curlicued with wax on it. I said, how could this guy make $500 million? Here's the first thing he said to those young people. It stunned me. He said, "Young people, I made my first $1 million when I was 16 years old." I mean, there were guys in the front row that were 16 or 17 who were ready to come up in the dais and grab him. Now, I've been coaching 36 years, and I haven't made $1 million yet. And this guy made it when he was 16, so I thought I'd better listen. Well, he talked for an hour and a half. We had to get a hook to get him out because he liked to hear himself talk. But when I was still in my 25% comfort zone, I heard 4 things that stunned me that night. 5 things that I'm going to give to you tonight, or maybe 4. All right? The man's name was W. Clement Stone. Okay? He's still alive. He's probably about 80 now. Okay? Here's the very first thing they said that night. There was a big, one of the few white guys in the room sitting right in front of me. I still remember his name, Johnson from Texas. 6'3", bronzed Adonis, crew cut, kind of out of style, you know. Wow, blonde hair, unbelievable. Here's what he'd done that afternoon. He had won the 100 meters. Ron will relate to this, and he's under Howard Jones. He ran the 100 meters electronically timed in 10.1. Now, how good is that? Let me put it in perspective because we don't have any track people in here. All right? I went to the Olympic Games in 1984. I sat on the finish line when Carl Lewis won the 100 meters. The greatest track man of all time. Better than Jesse Owens, 4 gold medals. He ran 9.99. This high school boy, 5 years ago, ran 10.1. That means if Carl Lewis was right there, this kid would have been right here. That's how close. That's a pretty good athlete. You know what Stone said to that guy? "Young man, I dare you to be great." I mean, the guy already was great. That's how dumb Stone was. But I came here tonight for Ron Hellberg and Michael Stryker to dare every single boy and girl, mom and dad, to be the greatest possible human being that you can be for the rest of your life. And we aren't here very long. When I sit down and think that I've been coaching 36 years, it stuns me. My life is almost over. Yours is just beginning. I dare you to be great. Here's the second thing he said. That was the last year that we held 2 girls' events. Now we're coming back and going to hold all the girls' events. But we held a 200 meters and an 800 meters. And we had a lovely Canadian girl sitting right where these 2 girls are, right over here, to the left of the dais. I can't remember the girl's name. She was 17, beautiful, black hair. She had won the 800 meters in 206.3, broken our all-time meet record. You know what Stone said to her? "Young lady, do it now." I mean, she'd already done it that afternoon, but he was so stupid he didn't watch the race when he was there at the track meet. She had done it now. What does human nature say? Well, I heard Michael Stryker talk, and I'll get off the beard next week, or I'll do my homework next week, or I'll do this tomorrow. We always put it off. This guy made $1 million when he was 16, and he said, "Young people, do it now." third thing he said that night. How can a guy that's 74 years old say this? And I wasn't that old that night. He said, I feel healthy, I feel happy, and I feel terrific. Then he made everybody in the room get up, and we had to scream at the top of our voice. I feel healthy, I feel happy, I feel terrific. Then he said, shut up, sit down. And it was like electricity in the room. You could just hear it. He said, young people, I'll give you my personal guarantee that if you will tell yourself enough times during the day that you feel healthy, happy, and terrific, no matter how bad you feel, no matter how big the contest is that's coming that you're worried about, he said, you can change your whole self-image for that minute, that hour, that day, that month, that week, whatever. And here's the last thing that he said that night, and then I tuned him out because I got outside my 25% zone. So if you're out of the zone, come back in. One of the most profound statements I've ever heard in my life. I've used it at the state cross-country meet for the last 5 years. We've gotten 4 firsts and 1 fourth. Here's what he said. Whatever the human mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. And I will add to that, if you're not involved in alcohol and drugs. He didn't say that. He said, whatever the human mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. And I will use Gary Baxter as an example of that. Early in the year, am I right, Gary? Our girls' team beat you twice, am I right? In the state meet, our girls' team finished 17th, and you finished 1st. You believed, and our girls didn't, and you won, and they were way in the back. Whatever the human mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. Sometimes I say these things more than once, not because I forgot, because psychologists also say you have to tell the average human being 6 times for him to hear you. So if there's any coaches in the area, and you only say it once to your athlete, make the bus at 7, and he comes at 9, that's your fault. You didn't tell him 6 times or her 6 times, because they don't hear you. I mean, I have a team meeting. I know this never happened to Ron Hellberg, and I'll say, men, we got practice tomorrow at 7:30. There'll be a guy sitting right there within 3 feet of me, freshman, raise his hand and say, when I'm all done, Coach Newton, are we practicing tomorrow? What time is practice? I say, what the? I just got through telling you that. But they don't listen. So I'm hoping that you came tonight to listen. And if you don't listen, I think it's on videotape, and then you go back and look at it again. Okay? Let me say this now. In 36 years of coaching, last year I went back and went through all my records of all the little guys that I've been coaching. And I found out that in 36 years, 95% of all the boys that I coach were less than 5'10", and they weighed less than 150 pounds. They weren't great big giants like you see in the NBA, the NFL. They were just little, average guys like are sitting right here in this room facing me tonight. Average guys that got motivated, that stayed off the drugs, that stayed off the alcohol, at least in their high school career, and they made it. And I believe there's genius in every single mom and dad, boy and girl that faces me here on the dais tonight. And when I say that to my gym class at York, immediately some guy goes, this guy is nuts. He's a kook. He's square. Me, a genius? Did you know that every single person that's born into the world, I don't care what color you are, what country you come from, in this 8 inches right here, Sebastian Coe, my good friend from Great Britain, the Olympic champ, has said to me in my home many times, when I get that 8 inches straight from here to there, from the chin to the top of my head, I can beat any man in the world. But he said the hardest thing in life to do is to get that 8 inches straight. Think about that. Try to get that 8 inches straight. But in that 8 inches, every person born into this world has the equivalency of 5 of the most modern computers known to man. Are you using it? Sometimes I wonder. I read a book by Abraham Lincoln. He wrote in 1862. I'll paraphrase what he said. God must have liked the common man and woman because he sure made a lot of average people in this world like you and I. But I maintain there's a lot of average people that are drug and alcohol free that are making it in this life. There's a lot of people that have more talent and more ability and don't have the character. They don't make it, young people. I went to a psychology seminar 25 years ago, and I heard the most famous psychologist in the world say this. Now think about this in perspective of that 5 computers you got in that 8 inches that Sebastian Coe talks about. He said 99% of the people in the world, like you and I, use 1% of the ability the good Lord gave them. In academics and athletics, whatever. That goes for mom and dad, too. He's talking about everybody. Then a person comes along, like perhaps W. Clement Stone that made $1 million when he was 16, and he puts out 2 or 3%, and we say, wow, the guy's a genius. He's a genius. Now, I said this very same thing to Schomburg in September. And when I went up to Coach McNider at the Peoria gym to shake his hand, Gary, after he had just won the state championship, first thing he said to me was, Coach Newton, we got that 3%. I said, yeah, we only got 2, you son of a gun. He remembered. See, when somebody says to you, you got to put out 100%, we're really lying to you. I know I can win every year at York of Elmhurst if I can get 3% out of my athletes. Why is that? Because all the other teams are putting out 1%. So if you want to make it in life, keep that figure in mind. I'll give you another figure. I went to Northwestern University. God, I graduated, I thought the other day, 1952. What is that? 35 years ago I got out of college. When I was a sophomore there, I had a course in psychology, young people. You might take that course. And the textbook was written by a guy named Dr. William James, who is the father of American psychology, wrote all the books. And a statement came out of that book in that classroom that day that I've never forgotten. And it's like it's right here burned into my brain. Dr. William James said, I've never ever known a human being that's put out more than 10%. And I made a determination as a sophomore in college that the rest of my life, regardless of the odds, I was going to be one of those 10%ers. Now, I've never made $1 million like Clement Stone, but I think I've had some good times in my life, and I've tried to serve and help young people. And you can have some good times in your life if you will put out 3%. I don't care if you want to be the greatest academician, the greatest salesman, the greatest pianist, the greatest athlete, the greatest human being, the greatest mom and daddy. Brother, you can do it if you'll apply yourself 3%. Think about that. We have an amazing phenomenon here in America that most people like you and I never discover the vast reservoir of ability that we really, really have. It's kind of amazing. So I came here one more time for Ron and Michael to motivate you. Number one, to stay off the drugs and the alcohol. Number two, just get it done. Be a great human being. Serve other people. Be a hero to some little guy that's coming along or little gal that's on the way up. Do that. Okay? Let me tell you. I know I got to get off very soon. I just looked at my wife. Let me tell you the greatest story of human motivation that I've ever heard. And if you've been out of the zone, come back in again for a minute or two. Okay? Michael's heard this 100 times, so has Ron, but bear with me. I read a book by a famous American author many years ago, about 15 years ago. His name was Viktor Frankl. And he spoke about the Jews in Germany in the Second World War. And he said, they were the greatest example of human motivation in modern times. So I read on. Here's what happened to those Jews. I saw it visualized for me on TV a couple years ago. They had a movie on TV called Holocaust or Holocaust. My daughter teaches second grade. She says, Dad, you never say that word right, so I have to say it's either Holocaust or Holocaust. I never know which it is. All right. In this book, Viktor Frankl didn't talk about all the Jews that were stacked up we saw on TV outside the gas chambers, all those skeletons. He talked about the ones that survived. Did you know this, people? They took those Jews out of those barracks at Dachau and those places in the middle of winter, like tonight, stark naked. Now, I'm not talking about young bucks. I'm talking about grandmas and grandpas and mamas and daddies and teenagers and babies. And they stood them in front of the barracks in the middle of winter, stark naked. And then to compound that, they brought fire hoses out and they sprayed them with freezing cold water. And some of those Jews died on the spot. And some said, man, you can't kill me. I won't die. I got a song to write, a book to read, a race to run. I got to go see my girlfriend, my mama, my daddy. And they wouldn't die. The ones that survived that didn't die of pneumonia on the spot. They took them back in the barracks. They took big clubs and went whack, fractured their skulls, and some died right on the spot. And other Jews said, I don't care how much you hit me, man. You can't kill me. I won't die. The will to win, the will to survive, the will to live. Finally, the ones that survived that, the Germans were smart. They knew the Russians and the Americans were coming, so they beat it. They locked all these Jews that survived in the barracks and ran away. It took us, the Americans and the Russians, 6 weeks to get there. By the time we opened the doors, the Jews thought it was the Germans coming back, and they were screaming, you can't kill me, man, you can't kill me. We said, no, no, we're here to save you. We looked at those Jews, and some of them, young people, weighed 40 and 50 and 60 pounds. They were human skeletons, but they made it. The will to live. If you could some way incorporate that into your life. Now, I've been telling a story all over America. And last year, I went without Michael to Sioux Falls, South Dakota. I didn't even know where that was. And 400 coaches showed up to a track seminar. And I got through making this speech, and I was up on top of a stage, and the audience was down below me. And as I was getting ready to go and taking a bow, a guy grabbed me by the pants, and he said, Coach Newton, come to the back of the room. He said, that was a great story you told about the Jews, but he said, I want to add something to it. He said, you forgot one thing. I said, no kidding, Dick. Yeah, he said, the next speaker's up. He said, you come way in the back, we'll talk. So I went to the back. This guy's name was Dick Railsback, Ron. He used to pole vault for UCLA. late 60s, early 70s. He held the world record, 17.6, when the pole was straight and didn't bend. Traveled all over the world for America. Dick Railsback from UCLA. He's now the sales manager for United Canvas and Sling, makes all the track equipment in America for the Olympic Games. They had it in LA. They're going to supply all the equipment in Korea. He works out of Lincoln, Nebraska. So he took me to the back. He said, I'm going to tell you the story about a 60-year-old Jew. And he said, I won't tell you his name till I'm done. But he said, it adds to the story. I said, no kid. He said, last summer, this 60-year-old Jew called me and said, Dick, I want you to fly to Munich. I'll meet you there. He said, I'm going to take you to Dachau. I was there 45 years ago, and I want to go back, and I want you to come. I want to show you. So my friend Dick Railsback said, you know, I didn't know how it was going to be in Munich, Germany in August. So he said, I put my hat, my coat, my muffler on, and he said, I was lucky because when I got off the plane, it was freezing cold. He said, the guy met me at the airport. We rented a car. We drove to Dachau. He said, we came to the gate, and the MP said, halt! Rolled down the window, and a 6-year-old Jew said, well, I was here 45 years ago, and I'd like to go in the back and show my friend the barracks and the ovens. And the guy said, oh, okay, pal. Boom, drove to the back. Dick said he parked the car, and we got out. He said his 6-year-old Jew got out, and he stood right in front of this one barracks. He said he didn't say a word for 3 minutes. He said pretty soon the tears began to stream down his eyes. He turned to me and said, you know, Dick, I stood on this very spot 45 years ago to the day. He said, my wife-to-be, 17 years old, was 3 spots over. He said, did you know that we were stark naked? I said, well, Dick, I know that. I already told the people. He said, yeah, okay, just wait a minute. Dick said, no. He said, did you know that they sprayed us with freezing cold water? Dick said, no. Then Dick Railsback, my friend, said, I thought of something. I said, Lou, how long were you out here? Now, all the time, young people, that I've been telling this story, I just assumed, because Victor Frankl didn't say in his book, that they were there for 15, 20 minutes. Some of them died of pneumonia. They took the rest of them back in the barracks and beat them. Listen to what this guy Lou said to my friend Dick. He said, we were out here day after day after day after day. Young people, that's 4 days. That's 96 hours standing in the same spot, stark naked, sub-zero weather, fire and freezing cold water, and somebody survived that? God, that's motivation. That's above and beyond. That's the story I say for when a mama sends me a note and says, Coach Newton, I need Peter Wright for 6 weeks off. He's got a hangnail. I call her up and I tell her this story, and now I can add what the guy told me. Just think, young people, if you could take just a little bit of that kind of motivation into your life, it would be easy to say no the next time somebody said to you, young boys or girls, take a drink, or take a hit, or smoke a cigar, or whatever it might be. I have 5 minutes, and I want to give you 2 quick stories, and then I'm out of here, and then I guess you're going to some rooms. But let me just tell you this. That night that Stone was there, he used 3 big letters. I can still remember that. I was still in my zone. He said PMA, positive mental attitude. The power of positive thinking. Let me tell you 2 quick stories. One from the baseball world, one from the boxing world, and then I'm gone. I read a book by Leo DeRocha 4 years ago. It was called DeRocha, big thick thing. I like to read about famous people. And in that book, he said the greatest ball player of modern times is. Now, Leo DeRocha is now 80 years old, but when he wrote the book, he had been in baseball as a player, manager, teacher for over 65 years. You think, I would probably say Babe Ruth, Ted Williams, Joe DiMaggio. You know who he said? And you got to appreciate this because Leo DeRocha was a southern redneck. He did not like black people. Here's who he said. Willie Mays, 5'10", 170 pounds. He said he's the greatest ball player of modern time. And 5 years ago, they put Mickey Mantle and Willie Mays in the Baseball Hall of Fame. Let me tell you something about Willie Mays, young people. The first day that Leo sent him to center field for the Giants, he was 17 years old. And he struck out 5 times. The ball never hit the wood. He never got a foul tip. He came back into the dugout crying. And Leo put his arms around him and said, Willie, you're my man, and you're going back out there again tomorrow. Now, I've been telling this story all over America for about 10 or 12 years. Son of a gun, a guy in Rockford 6 months ago grabbed me and said, Coach Newton, you're not telling the whole story about Willie Mays. I said, no kidding, tell me about it. He said, yeah, you're right. He struck out 5 times the first game, but he said, did you know that Willie Mays came to the plate 27 consecutive times without a base hit? Now, young people, what if he'd quit after the first day, or the second day, or the third day, or the fourth day? And 25 years later, He's in Baseball Hall of Fame, and Leo said the greatest of all time. Here's a trivia question for the moms and dads. The guy said to me, and I'll tell you what, Coach Newton, he got his first base hit at the 28th time at the plate. He said, you know who he batted against? I said, I have no idea. He said, you know what kind of hit he got? I said, I have no idea. He said, well, I'll tell you. He got a home run in his 28th time at the bat, and he hit it off lefty Warren Spahn, who used to pitch for the old Boston Braves, and who is enshrined in the Hall of Fame also as the greatest left-hander of all time. And my final story. When I was a kid, my father, when he wasn't drinking, was a steel salesman for Pullman trains. He used to get all these gifts at Christmas time, tickets to fights, and we used to go to all the great fights, Rocky Marciano, Rocky Graziano, Tony Zale, Sugar Ray Robinson. We'd be in the third row at the stadium. And my hero was a guy named Rocky Marciano. Rocky Marciano came from Brockton, Massachusetts. He was 5'10", he weighed 180 pounds. As the heavyweight champ of the world, young people, he was 49-0. He never lost a fight to another human being as the heavyweight champ. And if you ever saw him fight, he was flat-foot, double ugly, his arms were too short, his nose was splattered all over his face, he was slow, and you'd think these big Goliaths were going to kill him. Bop, 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 undefeated. Fantastic. Little Italian guy from Brockton, Mass. Well, I've been telling this story all over, and about a year ago, I was in Madison, Wisconsin. And a guy jumped up in the back row. He said, Coach Newton, that's great what you're saying about The Rock, but you're not telling the whole story. I said, no kidding. I kind of was flippant that day. I thought I was kind of smart. Yeah, tell me about it, pal. He said, well, I'm going to tell you about it because I'm from Brockton, Mass. As soon as he said that, I knew I was in big trouble. He said, as a matter of fact, I went to high school with The Rock, and I sat next to him in homeroom. I said, no kidding. Come on down. I want to hug you and shake the hand. I shook the hand of The Rock. And he came down, and there were about 600 people there that day, and I hugged the guy, and I shook his hand. I said, now, what's the rest of the story? He said, yeah, sure, The Rock was 49-0 as the heavyweight champ. And remember a year ago, Holmes was fighting Spinks, and if Holmes had won the fight, he would have tied The Rock, but he didn't. Okay? Here's what this guy said. You're not telling the people that before he became the heavyweight champ, he was 13-0. He said, so his true record as a professional fighter was 62-0. At 5'10", 180, too short, too slow, double ugly, no technique, he never lost to another human being. Clement Stone would say that's PMA. Positive mental attitude. Wow. You've been a tremendous audience. It's tough for me to reach out because you're so far away, but God bless you for coming, even though it's mandatory. And if there's just one thing I can leave with you, do it now. Thank you very much. Woo! Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Get all my stuff out of here.
I think you can see why he has a tremendous coaching record. As I said earlier, if you're interested, he has some copies of a motivational book he's written, and he also has some copies or some tapes of the Psychology of Winning, if you'd like to stop up here later and talk to him. There's a few changes in the room assignments at this time where we'd ask you to break up with your sponsor or your coach. The cheerleaders' palms and flags will be in the auditorium. The girls' gymnastics will meet in the new gymnastics gym. Boys' swimming will be in the commons. Okay. All of the wrestling will be in room 125. The girls' basketball will be in the choral room across the hallway. Varsity basketball will be in room 101. Sophomore basketball in room 124. And freshman basketball in room 105. I appreciate you coming this evening. Even as Coach Newton said, it's mandatory. I hope it's been worthwhile, and that if we have any problems, we can work them through. Thank you for coming. Good luck.